Hello and welcome. I'm Raghav, and this is part two of Katalon Studio Masterclass. In part one, we have discussed, we have looked at what is Katalon Studio, how do we start working with Katalon Studio. We have looked at the GUI, the features, the prerequisites. We started with creating a project. We looked at the test cases, how do we create automation tests, and how do we create tests in multiple modes, that is the recording mode, the manual mode, and the scripting mode. We looked at test suites, test suite collections. We looked at logs and reportings, the reports, and we also looked at custom keywords. So we have covered all that. And if I just list out all the topics, we have done all this. We started with introduction and getting started. We set up the tool. We looked at the features, web UI, automation testing. We looked at the modes of test creation. We looked at test cases, test suites, test suite collections, and we saw logs and reports and custom keywords. So I hope you have seen part one of this masterclass. And today, in this masterclass, I will start with execution environments, and I will go very basic step by step. So do not worry if you have never worked on any of these topics. I will tell you step by step from scratch. And we will see what are execution environments, why do we need them, how can we run our tests on multiple environments like a QA environment, a regression environment, a staging, or AUT environment, and or a UAT environment. We will see Katalon Recorder. What is Katalon Recorder? How do we use it? Why is it required in Katalon Studio? We will look how can we record and spy on existing browsers. We will look at variables. What are variables? How do we use them in Katalon Studio? And what are the different types of variables? And then we will look at data-driven testing. How can we get test data from an external source like an Excel file or a CSV file? And then we will look at checkpoints. What are checkpoints? How do we use checkpoints? And then we will learn how we can run our tests from command line. So this is going to be very easy and very interesting. Let's get started with execution environments. So what is an environment or execution profile in Katalon Studio? How do we create environments or profiles? We will look at a demo. So before I show you the demo and the steps, in general, when we are doing testing in our organizations, we have multiple environments. We can have a QA environments, we can have a regression environment, we can have a staging or a sandbox environment, we can have a pre-prod environment, and so on. So generally, we create our test on one environment, and then we may have to run our tests on all these different environments. And in all these environments, most of the things, most of our test data will remain same, but there are some test data, some data which changes with environment, which is called as environment dependent data, or you can say environment dependent parameters. So for example, the credentials, or we can start with the URL in case of web testing. The URL of the application may change a bit in different environments. The credentials like username and passwords may also change. There may be some other data, like some sensitive data, which is different in different environments. So in this case, if we have created our tests with some test data which is specific to one environment, and if we have to run the same test on a different environment, we will have to change this data. Now, one of the ways is we have to manually go and change the data everywhere where it is changed, or wherever applicable, but this will be a very time consuming, error prone and manual process, and this will not be very efficient. So for handling these kind of things, we have got a solution in Katalon Studio, which is called as execution profiles. So let me show you. So as we have seen this, we can have different environments, and we can have some environment dependent parameters which changes with every environment. And therefore we need a way that we can change these values with the environment without doing any manual intervention or any kind of, we do not have to touch the test cases. We do not have to touch the test data. We do not have to do any kind of manual changes, but we are still able to run on different environments. So here in Katalon Studio, we have something called as profiles, and you can see the very first top folder in your project Test Explorer is profiles. And if you open this, expand this, and if you see there is a default profile already created. So here, if I double click on the default profile, you can see here we have got a name and value or a key value pair. And if I click on add, I can give some key or any name here. I can select the type of value and I can give some value here. For example, let's say the key, I will say name, and the value I can say Raghav. So this is a key value pair, and basically these are global variables in Katalon Studio. So by global variable, I mean these variables can be referred to or can be accessed from anywhere in this project. So the variables that we create in profile under profiles are global variables, and they can be referred or accessed from anywhere in the project. So here, execution profile stores global variables. Now let us see the steps to create execution profile, and using the execution profile, how can we run our tests on multiple environments. Okay, so here we can create the variables under execution profile. As we know, we can do all this. So before doing this, let us create a test case. I will go to my test cases folder, and this is a demo test folder we created in the earlier part, and we created some of these test cases. All of these are here. So here I'm going to do a right click on the folder under test cases, and I will create a new test case. If you like, you can directly create the test case under the test cases folder. And I will say this is environment profile demo, and description and tags are optional. So I'll just create this test case. And here I will do a very quick recording. So I will go to this record web here, and I need to give a application URL. So let's say I will use a different application here. I'm going to use this application, admin-demo.nopcommerce.com, and I'll give the URL, and I can expand to see the recorded actions, and I will click on record. And here I will give the username. So username is admin@yourstore.com, and password is admin. And you can see the username and password here. And I'll click on login. So this is logged in, and now I can access the dashboard, or I can also click on logout. And after clicking on logout, I can check if I can see the login button. I will do a right click and say Katalon Studio, verify element present. So just a verification that we are back on the login page. And this is done. We have learned all this in the earlier session. How do we do recording? How do we check objects? So I will click on stop. As I click on stop, the browser closes, and the close browser action is also recorded. I'll click on save script. These are all the objects, and you can see objects from different pages goes in different folders. So this is kind of following a page object model kind of a pattern. So I'll say okay. And for verify element present, I can also give some timeout. So this is the timeout. I can just say 4 seconds here. So this is recorded. I will save and run the test to check everything is working fine. So it opens the browser and enters the username, enters the password, clicks on login, and it logs in, clicks on dashboard and logs out. And yes, everything is working fine. Okay, Now, let us say in this test case, there are three values which are dependent on environment or which will change with environment. Let's say the URL, the username, and the password. These things, these three values will change with environment. So if I try to run this on a different environment, it will fail. So all the values that are dependent on environment or change with environment, we will create variables for all such values under the profiles. So I'll go to the default profile and I will create a variable called URL. I will create a variable called username. And I will create a variable called password. So it's your choice if you want to use uppercase or lowercase. Generally, these are global variables. So it can be a good practice to use uppercase for global variables just for easy recognition. That's all. So I have created these three variables, URL, username, and password, and I'll give the values here. So this is the value for username. This is the value for URL. Then for username, I'll give the value here. And for password, the password is admin. I'll give the value here. It's in lowercase. I'll give the value, and we have got these values. You can have other variables if you want to, that's okay. If you want to keep the name variable or want to delete it, it's all fine. So you can select and delete from here. So we have created these three variables in the execution profile. Now in the test case, we will remove the hard-coded values and refer the values from the global variables. And before doing this step, you should save your test case or project so that we can refer these newly created variables in the test case. So I will go back to my test case, and here in place of URL, I will double click, and in the folder, in this column value type, I will select global variable. And here in the value, you can now see it has converted into a drop down, and this shows me all the global variables present in the project. So I will select this. Make sure that you have saved your project, otherwise you may not be able to see these, and say okay. Similarly for username, I will double click here and select the value type as global variable, and here select username. And for the password as well. Now one thing here, you can see it has recorded the keyword set encrypted password, and therefore the password we should provide should be in the encrypted form. So therefore, I will go back to the execution profile and I will change this. I will go to help and encrypt text. I will give my password, which is admin, and I will copy the encrypted value. And this is what I will use here instead of this value, so that it can be given to the set encrypted text keyword here. So again, I will get the password from global variable password. Okay, and save the project. So you can see we have parameterized these three values. We are taking these values from the global variables. Now, let us first run and check the execution, save and run, just to make sure that these values are referred properly. So I'm running my test case. It opens the browser, and yes, it goes to the application URL, enters username and password, and logs in. So that means we are able to refer our values from the global variables, and it is all working fine. Now, the next step is we will copy this profile and create more profiles like this for the different environments that we have, or for all the environments that we want to run our test cases on. So you can just select this default profile and press Ctrl+C on your keyboard to copy, or you can do a right click and say copy from here and select the profile folder and say Control V to paste, or right click and say paste here. So this is added here, and you can now do a right click on this default copy profile and say rename, and give it a name as per your choice, or you can give the name as per the environment. So I'm saying this is QA. This will have values for the QA environment. Similarly, I will again copy this QA environment and again paste it. And you can paste it multiple times, as many times as you want to have the environments, or as many environments as you have. And I will rename all these. This will be, let's say, regression. And this I will say something like sandbox, or let us say pre-prod environment. Okay, so now we have created all these different environment profiles, and now I can just go to any of these environment profiles. Let us say I go to QA, and here I will update these values as per the QA environment. So I will give the URL that will work on the QA environment, and I will give the credentials that will work on the QA environment. And the same thing I will do with regression and pre-prod. So I will update these values. Now, as of now, we are using a demo application and we have a single set of values or credentials. So I'm not changing it, but in real world, you will change these. And after this, when I go back to my test case, whenever I have to run it on a specific environment, I will go here. You can see there is a drop down which says default. That means the default profile is selected. And when I click on this drop down, now you can see we have the other profiles as well. And I can select any of the profile from here. And after selecting the profile, when I will run, it will take the values from that particular environment profile. So I have started the execution. It opens the browser, and you can see this is now taking the values from the QA profile. So this is how we can use different environments, or we can run our tests on multiple environments. In case you are running a test suite or a test collections, we can select the profiles there as well for a test suite. So if I go and select any test suite, for a test suite, again, the selection of profiles will be from here, from this drop down. For a test suite collection, we can select the profiles from here, from this folder, from this column. And this will be very useful. Sometimes if you want to run your tests on multiple browsers and different environments, you can add your test suites to test suite collections. And then you can select different browsers, different profiles, and you can run in parallel as well. So this will be very handy. You can select profiles like this. And this is how we can run our tests on different environments. So this was about environments. Now let us look at Katalon Recorder. Now, Katalon Recorder is a browser extension, and we can use this extension to record and playback test cases. So let me show you. We will learn what is Katalon Recorder, how do we use it, and we will look at a demo. So this is an extension for Chrome and Firefox browsers. And let us look at the steps. Here, we first have to add the browser, or we first have to add the extension on the browser. So if I show you on my Chrome browser here, if I go to the web store, I'll just search for web store, and this is Chrome web store. And here I can search for the extensions. So I'll search for Katalon Recorder. And this will show me the options. And here it is. So this is Katalon Recorder, and you can add it to your browser, Chrome or Firefox. Now in my case, it is already added. You can also see all these documentation about Katalon Recorder. and you can see it is here. It is already added. Sometimes if you do not find the extension icon here, you can go to the plugins, all these extensions, and you may find it here. So we have got the extension added, and when you click on this icon for Katalon Recorder, it will open a new window, a new tab, or a new window completely. And this is the Katalon Recorder window. So here we have open Katalon Recorder, and now we can create a new test. We can create actions. So let me show you. Here, this is the record button. This is the play test case. This is play test suite. Then we have play all suites, pause execution. We have different options to control the speed of the execution. We can go to settings, and all these links are here. Here you will find all your test cases, and we also have option to export our test cases. So let me show you. I'll click on record first, and it will take you back to your browser. And I'll just go to this application. You will see all the steps I'm doing will get recorded here. As of now, it has recorded. Open this application. Then I will give the username or email here, admin@yourstore.com, and here I will give the password and click on login. And here you can see all these are recorded. Now I had clicked somewhere, so it has recorded all those click actions and everything. So you can see everything is recorded. When you want to stop, you can stop the recording. And here, let me also see. All these are not required, so I can delete all these steps. I can go here and I can remove the steps which are not required. I can also select multiple steps by shift and the arrow key. And I can delete like this. So we have our test case. I can click on play test case, and you will see I'll have to log out first, I believe. Let me stop and play test case again. Okay, let me just close this, and now I will stop and play the test case again. So it will go to the application, and yes, it goes to the application, and then it fails here. I don't know why, but that's fine. So the reason I wanted to show you this is that you can create your test cases. You can record and run, and you will see all the options here. You can add more rows. So you can add more rows here. You can add more steps, and everything is here. So you can do all these things here, and you can see logs, screenshots, variables, everything here. We have an option to export. If I click on export, you can select the language, the programming language that you want to use, and it will convert the test case in that particular framework or language, and you can use it externally as well. Now, the reason we need Katalon Recorder is we are already using Katalon Studio, and we can do all these in much better ways inside the platform Katalon Studio. But the reason we require Katalon Recorder is sometimes you may have to record, or sometimes you may have to capture the objects from your primary system browser. So if I go here, if I'm on my Windows system, now if I go to my primary browser, this is my primary browser, that is my systems or the desktop browser. Whenever you use Katalon Studio, when you try to record or when you try to spy object, it always creates a new instance of the browser. So if let's say if I go to spy web, and I click on start, you will see a new instance of the browser opens. It is not my primary browser, which is this. It has opened a new instance, which is a completely new instance of the browser. And sometimes I may want to capture objects from my primary browser, or I may want to record on my primary desktop browser. In that case, we will require this extension, Katalon Recorder. So that is the reason we need Katalon Recorder. So we have seen how to get Katalon Recorder. We have seen its features and functionality. We have also seen how we can export and all those things. But we do not want to use Katalon Recorder for its functionalities. We just want it so that we can use it. We can do capturing and recording on the primary browser when we are using Katalon Studio. And that is exactly the next topic. That is how we can record and spy on existing browser. That is our primary system browser. So here we will learn how to continue recording the existing test case, how to record on active browser. We will look at some practical example. So here we have already done step number 1. We have added Katalon Recorder on the browser, on our browser. And now we will record. So let's say, let us take an example. I will go to my Katalon Studio and I will go to, I'll close all these and I will go to, I'll save all. And let me just go to this test case. Or I'll just create a new test case. I will say new test case. And I will say this is recording on primary browser demo. Okay. Now let's just say I will first do a normal recording. I will click on record web and I'll go to this application and start recording. I have my email and password already added. I will click on login and we have got here, and I will stop the recording and save the steps and the objects. Now here, when you are trying to record and you are trying to capture the objects which are already present in your object repository, you will see these in red, highlighted in red, and you will see this message here, highlighted objects already exist in selected folder. Please choose an option below. So you can either merge the changes into existing object. If you want, you can create duplicate objects, or if you want, you can replace existing objects. Now, generally, merge changes into existing objects works fine, but maybe due to some change or update in the latest version of Katalon Studio that I am using, what this option does is it will create duplicate attributes in the object repository for that particular object. Let's say this button login, it will create duplicate attributes, and then you will get a message that there are multiple or duplicate tags or properties, and then you will have to delete the duplicate attributes. So for that, for now, you can continue with this option, replace existing objects, and I will say okay. So let me show you the thing I was talking about is, so I'm going to this button login. This was the object. And if I had selected merge changes, then these attributes that we have here, these attributes, that is tag, type, class, text, etc., this will get duplicated. And that is the reason I selected replace instead of merge changes. So this is done. I will go back, and here I have got my test created. Now let's just say, let's imagine I have got this application open on my primary browser. This is my primary browser. I will manually go here and I will log into the application. So let's say this application is already open on my default primary browser. And on this test case, I want to continue recording after this step, and I want to record on my primary browser. So in that case, I will open this test case and click on record web. It says, do you want to continue recording? I will say yes. And here in the web recorder window, I will not click here. I will go to this drop down, and you can see we have two options under active browser. We have Chrome and Firefox, and these are the two browsers that we can use, the primary system browsers that we can use. So I will select Chrome, and it says that for recording on your primary browser, the Katalon Recorder extension is required. So I already have it. So I will say continue recording. And now you can see it has taken me to my default systems browser, and I can continue recording here. So you can see if I expand these steps, I will continue recording, and all these steps are getting recorded. I'll just click on log out, and I will stop the recording, and I will save the script. Now, before I save the script, you can see in these recorded actions, I already have the earlier recorded steps. So when I say save script and I say okay, I can actually overwrite the current test case because the earlier steps are also present in the recorded action. So I'm overwriting. I will have to delete these open and navigate to URL, open browser and navigate to URL, and I have got my test created. And I can save and run and check. So this will complete my test case. Now, this is a very simple example I have given you. In real world, it may happen that you have got a very long test case, which may have like 50 or 100 steps. And if you want to continue recording after step number 50, and you already have the application open on your default browser on that particular page from where you want to start recording, it will be very handy that you have an option to use your system's primary browser instead of Katalon Studio opening a new instance of the browser and you have to redo all the earlier steps. So it will be very handy in that case. Also, sometimes when you have some particular page, let's say you are manually surfing your application, you are working on your application, and you are at some particular page which is very deep in your application, and on that page you want to capture objects in Katalon Studio. So again, you can go to Spy Web, and here as well you can go to this drop down and say I want to use our active browser. I will say Chrome. It will ask you that do you have the Katalon Recorder extension. I will say I have, so I will continue, and you can see it has taken me to my primary browser, and there are so many other tabs as well here. So it has taken me here to my primary browser, and I can capture the objects from my default systems browser. So this will also be very handy in case of object spy. So we have done all these steps. We have selected the active browser, we have done, and we have checked, we have run and verify, and for spying objects as well, all these same steps will be applicable. Okay, so this is how we can record and spy on our primary systems browser. Okay, so now let us see headless browser. We have option to run our tests on headless browser. So headless means no GUI. When you have like this browser, which has a GUI and you can see it, you can you have a physical browser. This is a physical browser, and if the browser is running at the backend and you cannot see it, it is a headless mode or a headless browser. So headless means no GUI, and because there is no GUI, it consumes very less memory, so it can make your tests faster. Also, there are some operating systems like some distributions of Linux where you do not have physical browsers. So there as well, you can use headless browsers. So in Katalon Studio, we have the option. So when you go to this run dropdown, we have options for Chrome and Firefox headless. So if I select Chrome headless, it will run on the Chrome browser in a headless mode. In this case, you will not see any browser coming up, but the test is executing. You can see the logs. it has opened the browser, navigated to URL, it has clicked on the login button, and all this, it is running. So this one has failed, but that's fine. It was able to run. And similarly, we can also run on Firefox headless. Now, these headless versions of these browser come from the browser itself. This is not something created by Katalon Studio or Katalon team. These are the headless versions of these browsers. So Chrome and Firefox have headless versions, and that is why we have got these options here. Okay, so now let us learn how to refer and reuse our test case. So we have an option that we can call a test case in another test case. And let us look at an example. I will create a new test case and I will call it as login test, or let's say just login. And let me close other tabs. And I will record a login test on the same website that we are using. And you can see all these steps are recorded. I will pause the recording and stop the recording. I paused so that I do not record the closed browser action when I stop it. So this is done. I will just replace these objects and say okay. So this is our login test. Okay. Now let me create one more test. I will call this as homepage test. And here, for now, I will just do the recording again. And here, after I have logged into the application, I want to do some steps on the home page. And finally, I want to log out. So all these steps are recorded, and I will stop the recording and save the steps and the objects. Okay, now let me just delete these open browser, navigate to URL, and click on login button. Let's imagine we have separate test cases for separate profiles or maybe products or maybe pages. And to navigate to any of the page, any of the profile, we first have to log in. So I have to call the login test case in this test case. So for that, I will click on this. I'll go to step number 1. Click on this add drop down and click on call test case. And this will show us all the test cases in the project. I will select login and say okay. It comes as the second step. So I will click on move up so that this becomes the first step. So as the first step of this test case, we are calling the login test and then the rest of the steps of this test. So let us try to run and check. I will click on the run button, save and run. And let's just see if it first calls login. And yes, it is doing the login. And then it will do the rest of the steps of this test case. And finally, it will log out and everything is running fine. So whenever you have this need to call test cases, this is how we can call the test cases. And this is how we can reuse the test cases. Okay, now next we will learn how we can use variables. So we have 3 types of variables in Katalon Studio. We have private or script variables, we have local or test variables, and then we have global or profile variables. So profile variables we have already seen that we create in the profile. So all these variables that we create under profiles are global variables, and these can be referred from anywhere in the project. And if we create any variables in the test case variable section. So let's say I go to any of the test case. Let's say I go to this login test. And if I go to the variables tab here, and I can create variables here. Let us say, I will say this is username or whatever I want, password, and I can give the values as well here. And if I want, I can use these variables here in place of these hard-coded values. I can say this should be coming from a variable, and I can select the variable that I have created like this. So if I do like this, these variables that I have created here, these variables are called as local variables or test variables, and these are their scope is within this particular test case. They cannot be referred outside this test case, but only within this test case. So these are local variables. And then we have private variables or script variables. So if I go to the script section of the test case or any script, and I create a variable here, let's say I say def name, this is Groovy. So this is how we create variables. Just in case you are interested to learn Groovy in detail, you can go to my website, automationstepbystep.com, and I will have a Groovy tutorial here. If you go under the programming section, you will see a Groovy tutorial is here. So just in case you are interested, you can check this. So let's say I say name equals Raghav, and if I want to print, I can say println. I can say my name is, and I will concatenate this variable name. So if I now run this test and check the console, you will see it is printing here, my name is Raghav. So these kind of variables, if you create within the script, these are called as script variables or private variables, and their scope is only within that particular script where you have created these. So these are the different variables, private or script variables created inside scripts. It can be test script or any other script, local or test variables created in the variables tab, and global or profile variables created in the execution profiles. And we have also discussed their scope, where they can be referred. Now let us see data-driven testing, how we can get data from external sources like Excel or CSV files or database. So how can we do data-driven testing? Okay, so we can get data from Excel or CSV files or database or internal data store in Katalon Studio. And we will see how do we refer the values from these data sources. So here, step number one is we can create a new test or we can use an existing test. So let me just create a new test so that we have these all tests preserved. I'll create a new test. I'll call it as data-driven demo. I'll do a recording. I can use the same application. I will say this is admin@yourstore.com. This is password. I'll click on login and I'll just click on logout. And I'll stop the recording and I will save the script. So I have created a very simple login test. Now, the first thing is I will add the variables for the data that I want to refer from external files. So let's say here, I want to refer the credentials, that is username and password, from an external file. So I will go to the variables tab and I will create these variables. I'll create a variable username and I will create a variable called password. You can give any names to the variables and I will save. You can give some default value or keep it empty because anyways, we are going to get it from the external sources, the values from the external sources. So as of now, I have kept the values blank. Now, step number 3 is, in the test case, we will refer these values from the variables we have created, and this process is called as parameterization. So when we refer the values from variables in our test case or anywhere, this will be called as parameterization. So make sure you have saved your project, and now you can go to this value. So this is username. I will double click and say value type variable and select the variable I have created, username here, and this is for password. I will select from this drop down variable and select password here and say OK and save the project. So we have done parameterization. Now step number 4 is we can create an Excel or a CSV file. So let us see an example with an Excel file here, and then we will add the test data. So here I'm going to my desktop and I'll just create a new folder. I'll call this as test data. You can create an Excel file anywhere on your system. I am just going to my desktop and I have created this folder, and I'm going to create a new Excel worksheet. I can call this anything. Let's say test data 1 and open it. And here, there are 2 sets of data or 2 values I want to refer. So I will give the headers. I'll say username. Now here, it will be useful if you give the headers of these columns same as you have given the variables in your test case. It will help us in mapping. And in case if you want to give different names, that is also fine. But in that case, you will have to do manual mapping. I will show you that in a moment. As of now, I have given 2 columns. I have created 2 columns, and the headers I have given is same as the variables I have used on Katalon Studio. Now I can give the values. So the value for username is admin at yourstore.com. So this is the username, and the password. If you see, we are using the keyword set encrypted text. So the password should be encrypted. I will go to help and encrypt text, and I will give the password, which is admin, and I will copy the encrypted value. And this is what I will give here in place of the password. So this is one set of data. If you want, you can give multiple sets of data. So I can give this. I can give invalid username. So this should fail. So similarly, you can keep on adding multiple sets of data as many times you want to run, or with as many test data you want to run your test, you can keep on adding it here. And once you have added your test data, you can save. So I have saved my file. Now, step number 4 is we have to add this test data in Katalon Studio. So for that, you will go to Katalon Studio, and we can go to File, New Test Data, or we can go to the Test Explorer, Data Files folder, right click and New Test Data. Let me show you. I can go to File and New, and we have an option for test data here, or I can go to the Data Files folder here under Test Explorer, and here I can do a right click, New Test Data. So I can give any name. I can say login data or any name you can give here, and then select the source or the data type. So we have 4 options here. We can get the data from an Excel file, from a CSV file, from a database data, and internal data. So this time I'm going to select Excel file. Description is optional, and I will say OK. And now I will have to browse the file. So I'll click on browse, and I have my file on my desktop, and this is the file. I will say open, and you will see As you open the file, as you browse the file, all the data comes here. Also, you can see the sheet name. So whatever sheet names you have, you will come here. And if you have multiple sheets, all will be shown here. And you can also select the specific sheet you want to get data from. That means you can use a single Excel file and you can create many sets of data or test data for different test cases, different scenarios. And you can use the same Excel and just select the sheet here. As of now, it has a single sheet. We want to use the first row as header because our first row contains these headers. So I will check this. Now there is one more very useful option here, use relative path. Now in case you keep your Excel file within your project folder, in that case, you can use relative path and that will be very handy in case you take this project somewhere else or somebody else takes your project. If the file is outside your project folder, it will break on a new system. But if it is within your project folder, then it will work even if you take your project on any other system. Let me show you. If I open the project folder, so I'll just go to my project folder. So this is my project folder. You can also see the location from project and settings. You can see this is the location of my project folder. And if I just keep this test data folder, I'll just drag and drop this test data folder inside my project folder. So you can see it should be, let me see where it has gone. I think it has gone inside some other folder. Yeah, it has gone here. Let me just keep it inside my project folder. And yes, it has come here. And now if I go to my Katalon Studio and I will just say project, refresh, you can see it has come here. And I also have my Excel file here. And now I will say browse, and I will now this time go to my project folder. So it anyways opens your project folder, and I will go to test data and I will select my Excel file. And this time I will say use relative path. You can see it changes this path and it is now using a relative path, that is the path after the project folder path. So this is test data 1. So we do not care wherever our project is, it will always start from here, and now it will not break even if we take this project to any other system, and the Excel file will also go along with this. So this can be very handy. Now, after this, after you have done this step, we will go to the test case and we will go to the data binding tab of the test case editor. Okay, so I'll go back to my test case. You can save your project, go to your test case, and here you will see there is a data binding tab. Go here and we have to add the test data. So I'll click on add. It will show you all the test data that you have in your project. As of now, we have only this login data, which is this one we just added. I'll select and say okay, and it is now added here. And then we have done step number 7, that is we have selected the test data, and then we have to map the test data to the variables that we have in our test case. So these are the 2 variables, username and password. And now we have to map the data in our test data or the values in our test data to these variables. Now, if you have used the same names in your column headers, that is username and password as the variable names, in that case, you can directly click on map all. So click on save first and then click on map all. And it shows me found 2 matches. That means both of these matches are found in the test data. And if I say okay, all these columns will be auto populated. And I do not have to do any kind of manual changes here. But just in case, if you have used different names in your column headers than the variable names, in that case, you will have to do the manual mapping. You will have to go here. You will have to select data column here. And then here you will select the login data. And then here you will select the column header that you want to map, or the column name that you want to map with the variable username. And similarly for all the other variables. But because everything, we have used the same column headers, so we can just click on map all and then click on save. And now we will save and run. So we have saved. I will now run the test and let us see. This should run 2 times because we have two sets of data. First time should be pass as we have a valid set of data. The second data is invalid. Second time it should fail. So this is the first run. And yes, it is running fine. It is passed. And now it is running for the second time. And you can see the email is wrong. And therefore, it is not able to log in. And this one will fail. So this is how we can do data-driven testing. Now, in case you add your test case in a test suite, there also you will find a option to do data binding. So let me show you. If you go to a test suite, let's say I add my test case here. And here we have an option, show data binding. If I go here you will see 2 options. First one is use variable binding at test case. So that means whatever binding you have already done in the test case, it will be used as it is here. But just in case you want to use variable binding at suite test case, then you can select this and then you can again add the test data and do all the bindings. It will show you all the variables present. And then, so this is the test case I want to use, and it shows me all the variables, and I can also do the same steps here, add the test data and then click on map all. So I can do like that, or I can just use variable bindings at test case. So these are the 2 options we have in case of test suite. And this is how we can do data-driven testing. And in case you can also use CSV as we have seen. So let me show you. If I create one more test data, I'll just call this demo data. And you can see we have Excel file, we can use a CSV file, we can also use database data. So just in case I use a database data, I can give a SQL query, and whatever will be the output of the SQL query will be shown here, and that can be used as the test data. And to do connection with the database, you can go to file and go to, you can go to project settings, and here we have database. This is where you can do connection with the database. I had created a video on this. Let me just very quickly check. Katalon Studio database testing. If I give my name, I should get that video. Yes. So see, here is the video, Katalon Studio, how to connect with MySQL database. And this is created by me. So you can check this just in case you want to see how to connect with the database, and then you can also get data from a database. Then we also have option. I'll create a new test data. I'll say demo data 2. And if I say internal data and say, okay, here we get an option to create rows and columns within Katalon Studio or create data within Katalon Studio. So let us say I create a column username, I create a column password, and then I can just add the details here. I can keep on adding the rows. And I can add data here, and then I can refer it from here. So sometimes if you do not have very large data, you have limited data, you can always create the data within Katalon Studio and use it. So this is how you can do data-driven testing. Okay, next topic is checkpoints. We will see what are checkpoints and how to create and run checkpoints. So checkpoint is snapshot of data taken at a specific time. Let us see the steps. We will create a new checkpoint and we can go to File, New Checkpoint, or in the Test Explorer, we can go to the checkpoints folder and do a right click, New Checkpoint. So you can see here, File, New, and we have an option to create a checkpoint here. Or I can just go to the Test Explorer and we have a folder called checkpoints. I can do a right click and say new checkpoint. You can give any name. I will say checkpoint, let us say checkpoint 1. And here, again, I have to select the data type. So you can select a data type from database data, CSV or Excel file, as we have seen for our test data, or you can say test data. That means the data which is already added in your project in Katalon Studio. So if I say test data, description is optional and I will say finish. Here I will first browse the test data. So I have all these test data added. This is what I will use, login data. I will say okay. And now there is a button to take a snapshot. I will say take snapshot, and you can see this is the snapshot taken. This is the data as of this time. It also tells me this snapshot was taken at this particular time. And you can see we have got all the data and there are check boxes against in front of each value, each data, we have check boxes, and I can check or uncheck the data that I want to use in the checkpoint. Okay. Now this is because sometimes we may have dynamic data like timestamps, which will always change, and that should not be a part of the checkpoint because it will actually check if the data is same from the time the checkpoint was taken. It will compare from the current time and the time the snapshot was taken. So if there are any dynamic values, we should uncheck these. Therefore, we have this option to select the data that we want to be a part of this checkpoint. So we have selected data source, we have browsed and taken the snapshot, we have checked the data that we want to add to the checkpoint. Now we can create a new test case or use any existing test case and add the keyword to verify checkpoint. So make sure you save your project, and I will create a new test case. I will call this as checkpoints demo, checkpoint demo, and say okay. And here, if I go to the keywords browser and go to built-in keywords, web UI keywords, and go to utilities folder, you can see there is a keyword called verify checkpoint. If you hover over the keyword, you can see the details. If you click on this I button, it will take you to the documentation. As of now, the page is not available, but generally it takes us to the documentation. I will drag and drop to my test case. And now here, I have to give 2 parameters in the input column. If I double click, the first one is the checkpoint. So if you click here, it will show you all the checkpoints present in your project. As of now, I have this single checkpoint. I will select and say okay. And then in case the checkpoint fails, in case there are difference in the values, do you want to log the changed value? So if you want to see that in the logs, I will say true and say okay and save the project. So this is the step we have done. And we have done step number 6 and 7. Now I will save and run. So I'll click on the run button and let's see. Let me also check the log viewer. So this is running and looks like this is pass. If I see the tabular view, everything is pass. So that means everything is working fine. Now, just in case I change the values, so I go to the test data, which is my Excel file. And if I change some value here, I will say 123.def.com, and I will save this. And now I will run the test again, and let us see if it is able to capture the changed value. And yes, you can see it has failed, and it says checked value does not match at position row number 2, column 1. Checked value was abc@def.com and current value is 123@def.com. So therefore it has failed. So this is how the checkpoints work. So you can create checkpoints for any of your data. And whenever you want to check that your data has not changed, you can create checkpoints. And this is how you can verify the checkpoints. Now, this can be very handy. Sometimes in automation, a lot of times it happens that the failures are due to test data. Some test data has got corrupted, or the test data is not as per what we want, and the failures happen due to that. And the failures that happen due to test data are very difficult to troubleshoot and find out. So this can be a very good way. You can have this verify checkpoint as the first step of your test case, or maybe the first test case of your test suite. And you can check all your test data is proper, is correct, is exactly as you have you want it, and you can avoid failures due to test data. So this can be very handy, and you can use checkpoints for verifying your test data. Okay, so now let us look at the next topic. So we have command line runs. So we will see what are command line runs, how do we create command, how do we generate the command, how do we run the commands, and how do we test, how do we execute our tests from command line. So command line works for test suite and test suite collection. This I have discussed in the first part as well. So you cannot run individual test cases from command line. We can run test suites and test suite collections. And for that, we also require Katalon runtime engine. This also I have shown you in the first part. How can you get Katalon runtime engine? And if I show you in my case, I have it here. It is present in my D drive tools. I have downloaded both Katalon Studio and Runtime Engine folders, and I have also unzipped the Runtime Engine folder here. So we have done all these steps. So you can download Katalon Runtime Engine folder and unzip and keep at any location on your system. And then for the command line runs, go to Katalon Studio and click on Build CMD. So here on Katalon Studio, you can see this Build CMD button. Click here and we can browse the test suite or the test suite collections. All the suites and collections will be displayed here. You can select. We can choose the browser. We can choose the profile as well. So in case you want to choose a specific browser, you can do that. Or if you want to choose a specific profile, you can do that. This is your API key. It will be auto-generated. And then in case you are using TestOps, you can connect with Katalon organization, but we are not using that as of now. You also have options to update WebDriver automatically, retry failed executions. And then this is again for Katalon TestOps. As of now, we are not using this. And finally, once you have selected all the options, you can click on generate command. So this generates the command, and this command will run on Katalon runtime engine folder. So for that, we have done all these steps. We have generated the command. Now we will open the CMD or command prompt and change the directory to the Katalon runtime engine folder. So I will open my command prompt. Now, just in case you are on Mac, you can open your terminal and rest of the steps will remain same. You just have to go to your Katalon runtime engine folder. So in my case, my Katalon runtime engine folder is here. So I will copy this location, and because this location is on D drive, and my command line is on C drive. First, I will change the drive. I will change to D drive. I will say D colon and enter. I am now on D drive. Now to change the directory, I will say CD. CD is for change directory, and I will paste the location of Katalon engine folder. So CD space the location of Katalon engine folder and hit enter. And now I am on this folder. Now I can just copy this command and paste it here. If you see this command, it starts with Katalon C, and this file is present inside our Katalon runtime engine folder. Therefore, we need this Katalon runtime to run from command line. Then we have the run mode, console, the project path, which is your location of your project. Retry count is 0, test suite path shows the test suite that you will run, the browser we will use, execution profile, and API key. So these are the basic things we need, and you can hit enter and it should start the execution. Provided you have a valid license or you have a trial left, it should start the execution and run your test suite or collection. So you can see it is running, it is activating the license, and it will run the tests or the test suite inside the tests inside the test suite. So yes, it has started and it is running the first test of the test suite. And I think there are some issues in using the browser. So what I can do is, I think the browser is not working properly. So what I can do is there are two options I can try. First option is I can select this option, update WebDriver automatically. Let me try this and check if this works. I will also tell you what is the second option. I'll say generate command, and here I have this option added, WebDrivers auto update. I will copy this and run the command again. And let us see this time. So it is activating the license and checking if we have a valid trial or a license. And it will now start. So yes, looks like this worked. Updating of WebDrivers worked and it is working fine. It is running our first test, which is the test on the Katalon demo website. This is the second test on Orange HRM website. This time it is working, so we are able to log in as well. And then this is the third test. I think this is the data-driven test using the data file or the Excel file. This was the first test with first set of data. This is with second set of data, which will fail. So this is working fine. Now for the browsers, just in case this did not work, just in case if updating of WebDrivers automatically does not work, you can go to your Katalon Studio folder. That is the folder from where you start Katalon Studio, which has katalon.exe file, and go to configurations here, go to resources and go to drivers. And this is Chrome driver. Copy this Chrome driver.exe file and then go back to your Katalon runtime engine folder. And again, here you will have configuration, resources, and drivers. And again, you can just copy this here. So that means we will be using the same browser that we are using from the GUI. So just in case that does not work, you can use it like this. And this is how we can run from command line. We have already copied the command, and this is how we can run from command line. Okay. So this was the command line options. And here is a quiz that you can take. So this will take you to this quiz, and you can take this quiz. Each question carry 1 mark, and you can take this quiz and you can post your score in the comment section below. And if you have any questions, you can let me know in the comment section. I will try to answer you as soon as I can. And I hope this was very useful, very interesting. Please do some hands-on with Katalon Studio. Let me know if you face any issues. I will see you soon. Thank you for watching, and never stop learning.